Critical discourse analysis begins with a specific premise. Institutional texts deliberately use grammatical structures to obscure the truth and protect power. The method targets specific linguistic tools, pointing to agentless passives and nominalization as direct evidence of institutional evasion. The appeal of this framework is its emancipatory promise. It suggests that by exposing these grammatical tricks, an analyst can clear away the ideological distortion and uncover a suppressed, rational consensus. This approach operationalizes Michel Foucault's premise that institutions produce regimes of intelligibility. If Foucault established that theory, Norman Fairclough's critical discourse analysis acts as the scalpel used to examine how those regimes are built into actual sentences. But the entire critical charge of this method relies on a very specific starting point. It requires us to diagnose power in language as a pathological distortion of reality, rather than the baseline condition of how institutions communicate. In his essay, Exposure is Not Indictment, Willis proposes an alternative. He argues that institutional power in language is an operational necessity, not a deviation. Institutions operate in a state of semantic underdetermination. They are tasked with governing and coordinating across a public that holds plural, often completely incompatible views of reality. The critical framework assumes a hidden consensus could emerge if power were removed from the text. Willis's corpus assumes that semantic consensus is structurally impossible to begin with. To see exactly how the critical method overextends its empirical reach, we can map out three structural divergences between what the grammar does and what analysts claim it means. The stakes here are specific. Discovering the mechanics of power in an institutional text does not automatically constitute an indictment of malfeasance. Traditionally, nominalization turns a dynamic process into a static thing. Responsibility is diffused, and the actor deleted. Institutions use this to evade accountability, flattening specific failures into general states. But Willis identifies a mirror operation, the capacity of nominalization to manufacture an agent. Criminal courts rely on terms like will, choice, and intent. These nouns compress a vast field of distributed conduct into a single substantive. Once compressed, the grammar inverts. The noun is then installed as the inward source that supposedly caused those actions. Retributive justice requires this manufactured inward author to function. The grammar here is doing attributive work, locating a specific target for blame, not exculpatory work. Because critical discourse analysis focuses politically on responsibility evasion by the powerful, it systematically misses this attributive mechanism operating every day in magistrates' courts. Nominalization redistributes agency in a linguistic representation. Whether it conceals an actor or installs one is a contextual question, and the answer cannot be recovered from the grammatical form alone. Fairclough's model assumes readers have members' resources, which are socially acquired and produced through discourse. This causal logic suggests that if texts shape readers, then critiquing text has emancipatory purchase. Fix the text, fix the reader. Willis counters with preverbal ontological orientation, intercepting this process entirely. This orientation is a pre-linguistic relationship to the world. It dictates how a person recognizes threats, assigns authority, and perceives harm long before they encounter the text itself. Orientation dictates what information matters. A reader's reasoning follows that initial assignment of salience. It doesn't cause it. The exact same passive construction will register as an ideological cover-up to one orientation and as appropriate institutional impersonality to another. The text does not resolve the difference. Because texts structurally underdetermine their uptake, discursive intervention alone cannot close the interpretive gap on highly salient issues. Analysts verify findings across a three-tier effectiveness complexity gradient. Tier 1 contains countable textual features. Tier 2 is the arguable ideological interpretation. Tier 3 is the fluid effect on the reader. Fusing all three into a single claim creates what Willis calls the presumption gap. Terms like power, agency, and hegemony are highly fluid. Because the analyst and the reader share the same vocabulary, the analyst mistakenly assumes their specific ideological reading of a passive sentence will transfer perfectly to the audience. By doing this, the method hasn't escaped linguistic instability. It has merely relocated that instability into the analyst's own vocabulary. While a perfectly neutral interpretation of text is impossible, jumping across this gradient falsely elevates a politically committed interpretation to the status of a linguistic discovery. The entire critical framework operates on a specific counterfactual, the idea that power in language displaces a peaceful, rational settlement that could have otherwise been reached. But in the reality of institutional operations, a non-power-mediated settlement was never actually available. Institutions cannot suspend their actions while waiting for the public to reach an ontological convergence. They are forced to make a selection among competing realities. Institutional power serves a distinct function. It stabilizes meaning just enough to allow coordination to continue when language fails to bridge the gap. A grammatical evasion doesn't conceal a suppressed consensus. It conceals the absolute absence of a consensus. Under conditions of pluralism, power is not the corruption of politics. It is politics. Willis's framework reassigns the utility of critical discourse analysis, shifting its focus from simple exposure to distributional mapping. The method renders visible the distributional signature of a necessary institutional selection. It maps how an institution represents the selection it was forced to make. An agentless passive isn't a cover-up. It's evidence of which specific orientation the institution declined to name as having lost. Revealing these linguistic mechanisms does not dislodge the practice, because exposing a grammatical structure does not remove the institutional need it serves. What exposure actually achieves is narrower. It removes the innocence of the vocabulary, ensuring that those who invoke institutional myths must now do so with the diagnosis available against them. The grammar was already doing the baseline work of stabilizing an underdetermined reality. Realizing that, rather than discovering a concealed malfeasance, is the true finding.